I'm sure you know the feeling of working so hard that you can't wait to lie down and go to sleep. I remember one of my first summer jobs during my college years was exactly that way. I worked so hard doing manual labor during the day that I could not wait to go to sleep that evening. The harder I worked, the earlier I went to bed. Sleep was a welcomed respite from the labors of my day. Most people spend the majority of their lives trying to avoid hard work or working relentlessly in order to retire from working as soon as possible. However, work is a good thing, a God thing really. We were created to work. But we have also been led to believe that the harder we work, the better the results, and the better we are as people even. We think success is dependent on our strenuous effort. But is that always true? There's a phrase we adopted on a staff retreat many years ago, and it's not original to us, but it made sense and we tried to implement it. Work smarter, not harder. Just because you're working hard does not necessarily mean you are doing the right thing or the most productive thing, especially if God's not the one directing the work and you're not doing it as unto the Lord. In Psalm 127, which is one of the Psalms of Ascent, we find a recipe for good results from our work. That might sound like an oversimplification, but maybe the saying to represent this psalm would be work wisely, not vainly. Psalm 127 is widely held to be a wisdom poem. Although it's just 7 short verses, we still see 3 different types of wisdom sayings. In verse 1, we see the truth saying or proverb. In verse 4, we see the comparison. And in verse 5, we see the beatitude. I'll read the psalm in just a moment, and you can see if you notice these elements as well. Wisdom says that being more content in and trusting in God is far more beneficial and conducive to a satisfying life than working yourself to the bone in your own strength. There's no amount of hard work you can do to get ahead or to have enough or to finally rest if God's not the one behind the work. Because true rest is actually more than just physical. What we should be able to intuitively sense is that true rest isn't just the cessation of work, but the stillness of our souls as we put our hope and trust in His hands and not just the work of our own hands. Do you know when much of this stillness in our life comes to pass? While we're asleep. And this psalm in particular affirms what any of us who've laid in bed at night wishing we could go to sleep have experienced. Only God can grant sleep to those He loves, it says. Sleep is a blessing from God. As one study elaborates, the psalmist is not promoting negligence or laziness. Rather, he's calling people to restfully depend on God even when success seems to depend on human labor. With the right heart, sleep is no longer the sluggard's sin, but the believer's gift. Another commentary states, what great things God does for our bodily well-being in sleep. Every night He lays His restoring hand upon us, refreshes us, renews our muscular and mental powers, gives back to us the vitality and strength which had been exhausted. Every morning we owe Him a new song of praise. At the end of the day, literally and figuratively, what God has ordained, orchestrated, and led us to do is time well spent, and what is not is vain and pointless. But only the wise end up knowing the difference between the two, working hard in vain futility or working as unto the Lord. Wisdom helps us make these kinds of decisions correctly. So Psalm 127 helps advise us on everyday conduct, which is a theme you'll find often in what is called wisdom literature. The implication of this particular psalm is that by heeding the wisdom of these verses, individuals will discover true, abundant life through God-ordained hard work and God-granted peaceful sleep. To try to do either without God's direction and help is vanity. To put it another way, unless we are a part of God's work, our efforts are in vain. Jesus said it another way, apart from me, you can do nothing. I want to encourage you to seek God, work hard for the glory of God, and at the end of the day to rest peacefully for His glory as well, as we trust Him with our lives, our families, our church, and the world around us. Let the wisdom of God help you do all of that. Psalm 127, a song of ascents of Solomon. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for He grants sleep to those He loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord. Offspring a reward from Him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court.